With the WINNFM News, I'm Clive Backus. Officials on the front line in the battle against COVID-19 are warning politicians not to reverse the gains that have resulted in 15 recoveries from 15 confirmed cases of the virus. Reports have surfaced of political gatherings that were in breach of current social distancing regulations. Head of the National Emergency Operations Center, Mr. Abdus Samuel, laid down the law to political parties now in full campaign mode.
I'm appealing to all in the civil society during this time where we know we have our political environment for everyone to cease and desist from having large gatherings. The sacrifices what the task force, and not even so much the task force, let's take the task force and the frontline workers out of it, but the sacrifice that the citizens have made, the business sector, the clergies, the Christians, evangelicals, everyone who has some sort of belief, our society has been tremendous. Again, we cannot, and I said we must not lose out on the gains that we have made. Again, remember this, I want to be the first to be last and the last to be first. I am appealing to all, in particular, political parties, to exercise caution out of the abundance of precaution for our citizens, yourself, and all of us, and in particular our health sector, to do your part to adhere to the regulations.
He also addressed the issue of the borders remaining closed, saying all applications for travel to or from the Federation must conform to established procedures.
I've been getting a lot of calls about planes coming tomorrow, planes coming this morning, planes coming tonight, planes coming next week. Let me be abundantly clear. Section 11 speaks to restriction and international travel. I am a simple public servant, senior public servant, bringing you the regulation, and here's what it states. For the purpose of preventing, controlling, and suppressing the spread of the novel coronavirus and COVID-19 with immediate effect, A, except, listen me carefully, except with the prior written permission of the airport authorities, all airports, including private airports and fixed-base operations, shall be closed to incoming international flights. B, all seaports shall be closed to regional and international seafaring and private boating. And C, a visitor shall not be permitted to enter and disembark for any reason, including transiting through St. Christopher and Nevis.
The police continue to remind residents of the nightly curfew, which begins at 8:01 p.m. Persons other than those who are exempted in the regulations are required to have permission in writing from the Commissioner of Police if they wish to be outdoors in public during the period of the curfew. No person shall physically host, attend, or visit a private party, a recreational or competitive sporting event, or other types of public entertainment, a banquet, ball, or reception, any other ceremony in any facility or public place, a meeting of fraternal society, public or social club, or civic association or organization, any bars or rum shops, or any other type of social event. Persons, however, may attend virtual meetings. I will add, though, that permission must be sought if these meetings are to be held during the period of curfew. This period of political campaigning, parties engage in the posting of billboards, banners, and other paraphernalia to promote their respective messages. These advertising pieces are generally posted in public spaces. You are reminded that it is an offense to remove, destroy, or deface advertising boards, and the police have been sensitized and have stepped up surveillance, including electronic surveillance, and persons found committing any violation in this regard will be prosecuted.
Superintendent Carmen Henry speaking at the National Emergency Operations Press Briefing Wednesday evening.
Could the superintendent explain what he means by permission must be sought to attend virtual meetings if they occur during time of curfew? Superintendent.
Now, on limited operation days, persons are free to move about between the hours of 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. There is a nightly curfew from 8 p.m. until 8:01 p.m. until 4:59 a.m. the following day. The regulation sets out who can be out during that period. Essential workers, persons who are working as security guards, and staff of medical facilities. Those persons can be out during the curfew period. Regulation 3 provides that the Commissioner of Police may approve persons to be out during this period as well. So that if you wish to have a virtual meeting during the curfew period, then you are required to write to the Commissioner and request permission to have that meeting. If permission is granted, you are free to have the meeting. If you are denied, then you cannot have the meeting during the curfew.
Members of the opposition St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party were accused of breaching COVID-19 regulations on Labour Day, and an investigation was promised. Recently, accusations were leveled at the ruling Team Unity administration.
What they are talking to, I guess their supporters, so many people in the room, I'm sure it had more than 40 people in that room. No social distancing, nothing. Yet they have regulations saying that you can't have social gatherings unless it's a funeral or wedding. I don't know whether it was a funeral or wedding.
In more news, here now is this update on the health emergency operations situation. This report from the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws.
In the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, to date we have tested 391 persons. 376 of those lab results came back negative, 15 of which came back positive. Today we have no results pending. Now, what's happening in our quarantine, government-assigned or designated quarantine site? We have 3 individuals in quarantine in our government-assigned quarantine site, and we have 815 persons who would have been released from quarantine. I just want to underscore, we have 15 cases who would have recovered in the Federation, 11 St. Kitts and 4 in Nevis. I also want to add that of the 15 cases that we had, only 3 patients, or 3 of the cases, were admitted to hospital for 2 to 3 days. They were mildly impacted by COVID-19, and out of an abundance of precaution, they were admitted for about 2 to 3 days and released. Yes, we did have about 2 or 3 persons admitted to the COVID ward or the private ward at the JNF General Hospital. There were suspected cases. They were all tested, meaning they were sample tested. They got the molecular test done, and their results came back as negative.
Defense Counsel and former chairman of the People's Action Movement, Mr. Chesley Hamilton, argues that a free and fair election cannot be held under a state of emergency without any clear regulations about how the election should or would be conducted.
It is wrong, 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 and I'm calling on civil society to say it is wrong. What is the emergency that we are under? COVID. We have nobody in hospital, or everybody has recovered. So therefore, we are going forward. What are the ground rules and the protocol to go forward? How could we assemble? How could we be associated? How could we express our views? If my views are contrary to how the government is conducting this, I could be charged with expression that is against public order, public morality, public safety, because all of those are the rights of the executive at this point in time. Because Chapter 2 of the Constitution is suspended, the Emergency Powers Act and the Emergency Powers Regulations are in addition to the COVID regulations. And all of that is in the hands of the executive.
Mr. Hamilton, a vocal critic of the Team Unity administration, says the country should not engage in a race to the bottom.
I'm calling on civil society. I'm calling on people within the unity government. I'm calling on Lindsey Grant. I'm calling on Sean Richards. People who demonstrated for electoral reform. People who got locked up so that we could have a free and fair elections. Not to say, well, they do it and we could do it now. We are not on a race to the bottom. What is going to be next? Have an election while people are in jail? No. We are not in a race to the bottom. We are about protecting our democracy, and all of these actions must be reasonably justifiable in a free and democratic society. Not where you can have an election, the opposition cannot even assemble, they cannot express themselves. If by even expressing myself here, somebody feels that I am saying something that is prejudicial, you hear the word? Prejudicial to public order, public safety, or public morality, I could be arrested under a state of emergency because these rights are suspended.
The government implemented a state of emergency to combat COVID-19. Curfews, restricted movement, and social distancing regulations are in effect. There is no official announcement at Newstime Wednesday about the rules of the road for this election in the present context. Nominations Day is Wednesday, 27th May, and Election Day is on Friday, the 5th of June.
This is the news in brief from the United Nations. The health of all those in Africa hangs in the balance because of COVID-19, and the world must stand in solidarity with the continent, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said on Wednesday. To date, the new coronavirus has claimed more than 2,500 African lives, and many countries have moved swiftly to prevent the spread of infection by deploying health workers, enforcing quarantines and border closures, Mr. Guterres said. Continued vigilance and preparedness are critical in these early days of the pandemic, the UN chief insisted, as he launched a pandemic resilience blueprint for African nations who've been hard hit by falling tourism, lower remittances and less demand for commodities.
We are calling for international action to strengthen Africa's health systems, maintain food supplies, avoid the financial crisis, support education, protect jobs, keep households and businesses afloat, and cushion the continent against lost income and export earnings. It will also be essential for African countries to sustain their efforts to silence the guns and address violent extremism. And I welcome African support for my call for a global ceasefire.
In line with his call for a global fund to get countries back on their feet after COVID, Mr. Guterres said that Africa should receive more than $200 billion in additional support from the international community. Women remain central to every aspect of the pandemic response, and stimulus packages must prioritise putting cash in their hands, he said. Acute malnutrition among under-5s could rise by 20% owing to COVID-19, the World Food Programme WFP said on Wednesday. The UN agency has warned that young malnourished children are especially at risk from the pandemic and plummeting family income. Because of this, it expects that an additional 10 million children from the world's poorest countries face not having nearly enough to eat. Failure to act could cause a devastating loss of life, health and productivity in future generations, said WFP's Director of Nutrition, Lauren Landis. Today, 22 million under-5s and pregnant and nursing mothers rely on specialised food provided by WFP to prevent and treat malnutrition. The agency is already working with governments to monitor populations that are vulnerable to COVID-19 and adapting nutrition support where required. And it is using its presence in remote communities to share infection prevention measures with those beyond the reach of fragile health systems. Finally, amid concerns over global food security linked to coronavirus travel and border restrictions, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, said on Wednesday that it's a good time to remember that most of the world's vital food crops depend on bees and other pollinators. That's the agency's message to mark World Bee Day, amid clear signs that the winged insects are declining in alarming numbers, mainly from intensive farming practices, agricultural chemicals and higher temperatures associated with climate change. COVID-19 has also affected beekeepers too, particularly those living in extreme poverty, including women, young people and those with disabilities. And FAO is calling for more action to help all those who work with bees overcome increased challenges. For its campaign, the agency has highlighted how important bees and beekeepers are in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, 17 pledges made by the international community to eradicate poverty and inequality by 2030. Daniel Johnson, UN News.
Jackie Northam, NPR News. At least once a week, the Port of Los Angeles launches a drone over its expansive facility. The port's executive director, Gene Soroka, displayed photos from a recent flight which showed stacks of cargo containers on the docks. Many are heading to warehouses already filling up because of the coronavirus.
We have approximately 1% vacancy in our more than 1.8 billion square feet of warehousing throughout the Southland.
This is a scenario playing out at many ports in the U.S. and the rest of the world, says Lars Jensen, the founder of Copenhagen-based Sea Intelligence Consulting. Department stores and retail outlets that placed orders are now shut, but the cargo was already underway. Jensen says quite often it's left on the docks.
If you look at India, for example, there was a period here where at least 60% of the truck drivers, they were not at work because they had been put in quarantine. So you might not actually have the trucking capacity to move it.
Or there are serious cash flow problems.
The importer might, for example, have gone bankrupt. That is a very real risk in these days, which obviously means he's not going to come down to the port to pick it up.
Jensen says others have simply run out of warehouse space. This is a complete reversal from late February, early March, when Western importers were desperate to get goods again from China after the country had been closed down because of the coronavirus, says Shireen Zarkani, global head of sales for shipping giant Maersk.
As soon as China started opening up, we had this rush of our customers asking to really find ways to speed up the supply chain.
And then the coronavirus spread to Europe, the U.S., and elsewhere.
All of a sudden, those same customers who were really rushing to get the cargo in, we started having completely different conversations on how do we store cargo.
Maersk is one of a few shipping companies that have come up with ways to store cargo until the pandemic lifts. It is allowing large numbers of shipping containers to be stored at their hubs scattered around the world.
We have around 5 big ones around the world, like in Malaysia or in Morocco.
Sea Intelligence's Jensen says other shipping companies are changing routes in order to slow down the shipments and save money. For example, bypassing the Suez Canal, where Jensen says a single transit fee for a big container ship can cost $500,000.
Suddenly, it makes sense to take a long route all the way around Africa and not use the Suez Canal. And there's apparently a lot of the importers that don't really mind the cargo being a week delayed.
The amount of shipped cargo is likely to slow down as fewer businesses place orders for goods until the coronavirus pandemic is over.